Welcome into Out of Bounds alongside with John Luck. I'm Brian Berard, and it's coming to that point of the season, John. Football is right around the corner. It's time for fantasy football. We're going to give you some of our picks for fantasy football. We'll take a look at the ESPN's top 10 fantasy football players in just a second here. But, John, are you excited that fantasy football's here? We've already you and I have already had one draft. We have another one tonight.
I'm excited because I drafted the winning fantasy football team, so you can maybe take some lessons from me, people, as you're watching this.
Don't
do everything I do. You'll get a championship.
No, you'll come in dead last place if you do everything this guy does.
Or you can draft a running back that's going to sit week 17 and get blown up by the eventual champion. But
John, that was by default. So we'll take a look at the top 10 fantasy draft picks according to ESPN, and there you see them, John. Look at all those running backs, with the exception of a couple of wide receivers, but. John, for the most part, do you agree with that top 10?
For the most part, I do. I think running backs are going to certainly be one of the first things to fly off the board just because you had that LaDainian Tomlinson effect, effective for 2 or 3 years, and he's done. Now, another aspect when you talk about the running back now is they're kind of your slot receiver. We see it now with James White and the Patriots. Saquon Barkley, one of the running backs you saw there from the Giants. He's going to be one of those guys that's kind of used as a slot receiver. He can run the ball, but he can also catch those 5, 10-yard gains.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting because especially if you know PPR leagues, you get those extra points, which really could be that tiebreaker. And of course, if you also play in those leagues that use the decimal points and points for this, that, and the other thing, those can be key. So, John, who is your fantasy stud? Who is going to be that number one player that you have to go out and get?
Well, I think I'm going to stick with Saquon Barkley. He was my number one pick in the draft that Brian talked about earlier. Just because I think when you talk about the New York Giants, I think the passing game with Eli Manning, Odell Beckham Jr., we'll get to this probably in a little bit, but I think Beckham Jr. probably isn't going to have his best year. I think for the Giants to have any success this season, it's going to be on the ground. Saquon Barkley played in the Big Ten, a really defensive-minded conference, kind of like the NFC East for the most part. And some of the teams that the Giants are going to be facing this year, I think that maybe they aren't prepared to take on the run like a Saquon Barkley and a big running back like that, some guy who's 240, 250.
The big thing that I have with Saquon Barkley is he's a rookie. He hasn't played in the NFL. I mean, I know he played at Penn State and had a tremendous campaign at Penn State, but you come in here in your first year in the NFL, and we've seen rookies come in and have big fantasy impacts, but for me, I have to go with Le'Veon Bell. For the past 2 years, he's proven that he's the number one pick. I mean, I know last year a lot of people took David Johnson, but then he got hurt, and then Adrian Peterson kind of resurrected his career a little bit there, but to me, I have to go with Le'Veon Bell, and I know 2 years ago, I drafted him, I think, somewhat in the 4th round because he had that 4-game suspension from, I think, performance-enhancing drugs or marijuana or something, something like that, and he turned out to have a pretty damn good season. The last year, a lot of people took him number one overall. Still had a pretty darn good season, and I don't really see any let-up from Le'Veon Bell. The only thing I can see is maybe that contract issue that he had is still lingering in his head, but I really don't see that being that much of an issue. But go ahead.
I think the counterpoint to that is you have the development of Juju Smith-Schuster, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Certainly gives them another option to throw the ball down the field. I think Roethlisberger still has another few years to go as far as his arm game goes. Of course, when you talk about concussions and head and neck injuries, that's the risk for him. But as far as passing goes, if this is a clean-looking Pittsburgh Steelers offense, I think Le'Veon Bell is maybe going to start seeing that decline because, like I talked about earlier, most running backs have a window of 4 or 5 years where they're the most dominant player. And Bell, with all these contract issues, I have to wonder how much working out he's done away from the team because he's held to have OTAs and practices as well.
Well, to counterpoint your counterpoint, John, last year you had Antonio Brown, you also had Juju Smith-Schuster, and you had Martavis Bryant, and Le'Veon Bell still had one heck of a season. So even though you have all those weapons in Pittsburgh and now Martavis Bryant's gone, I still believe that Le'Veon Bell is going to be one of the top fantasy players.
I think the thing we can agree on, though, is the fact that running backs are certainly something as you draft, be it a PPR, non-PPR league, or any type of fantasy league, running backs are going to probably be a top 2 item for you as far as drafting your football team, I think.
All right. Now, John, who are your duds for fantasy football? The players just avoid at all cost.
So I think Todd Gurley is a player to look at. He was second in rushing yards last year. He's kind of been one of those hot and cold type of running backs. Had just over 1,300 yards rushing last year, 13 touchdowns, top 5 rusher. But he's been a real hot and cold running back. Also, the Rams are facing 2 top 5 rush defenses from 2017 as you get later in the season. So when you start talking about the playoffs and later in your fantasy season, December 16th against the Super Bowl champion Eagles, October 14th against the Denver Broncos. So I think that's something to watch out for. Also, David Johnson was injured last year, I think in the second game. But 2016, he was a good running back. But just any person coming off of a season-ending injury. So Odell Beckham Jr. would probably be a wide receiver I'd be looking at as far as a bust. David Johnson, a running back, as far as a bust. And Todd Gurley, maybe a coin flip, but I'd probably go more bust for him.
See, I agree with you on David Johnson and in Odell Beckham. And the reason why for OBJ for me is you have a new coach again in New York, and he just signed the biggest contract out of all the wide receivers. And I see a lot of times these big name players, they go get their money, and then they're, all right, let me just settle down now. I got my money. I don't care anymore.
He's got a significant other that kicking net.
Yeah, yeah. Don't forget the kicker's net too. Another person for me that I would avoid too is Adrian Peterson. I know he signed with the Washington Redskins, and their backfield has really been kind of injury riddled this preseason, but I don't really see a lot coming out of Adrian Peterson either at all, really, this year.
I think that's fair to say because Peterson, he wasn't supposed to be a part of this running game for the Washington Redskins. Their star running back, I forget who it was, but he actually got injured against the Patriots, tore his ACL, done for the year.
Yeah, so there's some quick fantasy tips and tricks. We're not going to give away everything because, John, you and I have our BTV fantasy draft. We don't want to give away the secrets.
I can share secrets because I have...
Well, your secrets are awful.
I'm like a 3-time champion.
Yeah, but not against me.
I beat you, but...
No, you didn't. No. See, here's the thing. I lost. You didn't win. That's because the Steelers sat Le'Veon Bell 2 years ago in the last week of the season.
No, you pulled in the...
I didn't have 100% of my team.
You choked.
I didn't choke at all.
You choked.
No. You can blame Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers who didn't want to start Le'Veon Bell. All right. Anyways, as always, you can watch Out of Bounds on our YouTube page, and you can watch any other BTV programming. Go to youtube.com/BTV Access. So once again, for John Luck, I'm Brian Berard. Thanks for watching Out of Bounds.